Good afternoon. All we need is love. I know the song kind of comes right to right, but love is a challenge. Sometimes we feel that we don't have enough. Sometimes we feel that we have never seen it or haven't experienced it, and we feel down. So much so that it's not uncommon for us to see high levels of depression, suicidal ideation nowadays, and really feel like we don't belong or we're an outcast and that things are difficult. And that may be so. But what if? What if I told you that there is a way of looking at it in which we can see that there is actually a lot more love than we imagine? And what if we could tap into this love on a daily basis to change our lives? How would that feel? How would that change how we behave and act and make our choices? And where can we find that love? Well, obviously, we are going to abbreviate the search in 15 minutes. Because the bottom line, you already know, all we need is love. But what I hope to make a case for today is that you already have so much love that you may not be aware of. And today we are going to try a non traditional way of getting there. We're going to try to do some math. So bear with me, right? First, let's just begin with the simple idea that if we look through the world out there, things are hard. There's lots of hatred, intolerance. We don't seem to be able to get along with each other very well. We discriminate. There are wars. There's violence, fear, you name it. But that is mainly because we're looking at through a physical lens. What I want to invite you to do is to perhaps change our perspective. And that's why I often say that Spiritism is able to do this. It's like wearing a pair of glasses. It is about looking at things better than we did before and seeing things differently. And what I love about Spiritism is that once we begin to explore spirituality and bring that into our lives, it changes the way we perceive ourselves and the world around us. When we begin to understand that this great journey of understanding of our spiritual selves that began about 170, 180 years ago in Spiritism with Kardec, it has allowed us to understand that we are spirits first and physical bodies second. And when that takes place, we change our perspective about the world and what's happening and why it is happening. And that's, I think, the gift that Spiritism can do for us today, which is to invite us to see the world not as it seems on TV, but as we can perceive with the spirit in our souls. And one of the wonderful things that Spiritism has given is perhaps its greatest legacy is the ability to understand the interaction between worlds, is to see and experience firsthand that there are spirits, that we are spirits, because we can communicate through them, with them through mediumship. And when we begin to understand mediumship, when we begin to have these conversations with multiple sources, multiple spiritual sources in different places, we have learned about reincarnation. And that is a beautiful key that allows us to change the perspective of love. Because if before we thought that the world might be unjust and unfair and skewed a certain way, when we learn about reincarnation, we begin to think about the love of the Creator for us that gives us as many chances as we need to improve, to grow, and as many lifetimes as we take. But there's not only about growing and learning, it's also about being. It's about connecting with each other and forging relationships and finding love in ways that perhaps we don't expect. I myself never expected that Spiritism would bring so much love to my life. I mean, I did expect that it would give me a different perspective into thinking about the world, and I sought that. But I never understood there was a second gift, which is the gift of you, of knowing people I would not otherwise have met in my life were it not for the opportunity to interact with people like me trying to understand Spiritism. and forge these relationships. So reincarnation allows us to understand that God is so kind and just that allows us to grow and gives us as many chances as possible, and at the same time gives us each other so that we can support and care for. So that is a major source of love. But, then that's nice, but maybe that's not enough. Maybe I can't quite see just yet. So let's look a little bit deeper for love. Where else could we find love, the love that maybe we're not seeing? Well, one natural process or one natural place for us to do that at is with the people you already love, you know. And many times that's our family, right? I understand that some of us may struggle with families in this lifetime, but I'm not only talking about our biological family, I'm also talking about the family we choose. But in that family, there is some sort of love. And it's also important for us to note that as it has been noted here before in the event, we're not talking about romantic love. Love is way more complex and beautiful than that. We're talking about feeling cared for, appreciated, and accepted with no judgments, just the way you are. If we could feel appreciated, cared for, accepted, just the way we are, that's love. That support that comes from people knowing who we are and knowing that we're not perfect, but still caring for us, accepting us, it's magical. And so why don't we try to put some mathematics into it to look at things differently, right? So let's think about this for a second. Our families are the people that you care for. How many are there in this lifetime? How many people are here in this lifetime that you truly care for? Maybe you experience love that way. And sometimes, as you know will happen, some of those loved ones may depart. We call it discarnate. They die. But do we stop loving them because they died? We do not. And do you think that they do stop loving us because they died? No. So we forget. We forget that the love that we build in this lifetime, because we don't think spiritually, carries over to the spiritual world. So any point in time, the love that our family builds is immortal. It's forever. That's where mathematics comes in. And that's where I am pushing us to think about reincarnation from a little bit of a different perspective, because we understand, I think, conceptually, if you're here, that reincarnation could be a fundamental piece of divine justice. It explains why people are different, why people have different backgrounds and different challenges, because they have different consequences to their actions and their choices in the past. And we're all learning and we started at different points. So it makes sense that the world is different because we're not starting from the same point. But what I think is really interesting is if we start to do some calculations, because, and it's going to be easy, don't worry, we've got a calculator there, we're going to be okay. We can take some assumptions in and start to think about reincarnation, not just as a concept, but as a mathematical fact of love. So let's assume, for instance, that in every lifetime, like such as this one, you've had 4 people in this lifetime that you love, that you care for, that you accept and support without expectations. Some of us may have less. Some of us may have a lot more. And this lifetime may have been different from a previous lifetime. We don't remember. But 4 number seems like a conservative number. Maybe you have parents, siblings, and children. And if you have 2 parents, 1 sibling, and 2 children, that will already put you at 5. But let's imagine for now it's 4, right? And let's imagine too, this is where mathematics gets interesting, that we have 1 incarnation every 100 years. Is this a fact then? It is not. It is an assumption that I'm making, right? Let's make an assumption that every 100 years we incarnate once. We know the life expectancy back in the day was way less, so it's possibly that we incarnated more quickly than that, right? But imagine for a second that 1 incarnation every 100 years. Now, for how long have we been incarnating then? Great question. I couldn't tell you. But I can make some assumptions. Because I know, for instance, that the Homo sapiens, the most updated version of humans in this physical body, have been present on this earth for at least 300,000 years. So for 300,000 years, we roughly have had the same shape that we have. Minor differences, some evolution, we can talk about this later. But we also know that we just don't incarnate as Homo sapiens, that the spirit predates that. But let's park that for now. Let's be conservative with our estimations and say, if we have been loving 4 people per lifetime, and if we have been incarnating once every 100 years, and let's say that we started at the Homo sapiens time, we started way before that. If I divide, follow me here, math challenge people, 300,000 divided by 100, right? That's the number of incarnations you had. Multiply that by 4. No need to do calculations. 12,000. 12,000 people in your circle of love. And you can go, what? 12,000 people? That's way too much, Dan. I can't fathom that number, right? And I'm like, don't. Let's think a little bit more about this and say, you know what? Let's imagine that it wasn't 300,000 years ago that instead of incarnating since the beginning of Homo sapiens, we began incarnating since the beginning of Homo sapiens sapiens, which is the current species of physical anatomical body that we have. And that happens 150,000 years ago. By our math, that gives us 6,000 people. But you go, 6,000 people, Dan, that doesn't sound right. That's a lot of people, right? And I say, you know what? You were right, because in Spiritism, we also know that we have the friend and family discount. And what do I mean by that? We don't always come in different lifetimes with different people. We evolve in groups. So it's possible that some of those 6,000 people or 12,000 people have been the same people. So if you give a 50% rate, right, you've been roughly incarnating with the same people once every 2 lifetimes, then you'll be just 3,000 people. But you say, no, Dan, I've got lots of issues to work with my family. It's been more than that. I'm like, all right, 75% repeat rate. Then you've come across 1,500 people. No, Dan, I think that maybe it's less than that. I'm like, all right, 90% repeat rate. Let's be really, really conservative. You have been with the same group of people in 9 lifetimes out of 10. Which I think is really conservative. I think you've met more people than that. That's just my opinion. It gives us 600 people. 600 people that care for, love you, and support you just the way you are. But you say, Dan, I don't trust that number because I know that not all of us incarnate at the same time. I'm like, that's right. That's why we have the incarnate discount. In our incarnate discount, let's assume that 50% of these people are in the spiritual world, while the other 50% are also incarnate, right? Which leaves you to at least 300 people that are loving you and cheering you and supporting you from the spiritual world right now, if you're really conservative with your numbers. Stop to think about this. There are 300 people. That is 10 coaches of 30 people. That is 5 rooms this size of people who are exclusively loving you and supporting you and hoping that you are going to be the best that you can be at any point in time. But we don't remember that. We forget that because we get so trapped in our physical existence that we fail to connect the dots on this beautiful knowledge that we have been given that explains to us that we are an immortal spirit traveling through space and time together, building connections, supporting each other and loving. Which means that at any point in time when sadness hits your heart, when you feel a little down, when you feel a little depressed, you have to remember that at the very least there's 300 people on your personal cheering section who are sending you the best vibrations of love. And these are people that have been with you through life and death. They have seen you in your worst times, in your best times, and they love you at any point in time. So there is reason to be optimistic, not only about us, but about our path moving forward. Because the amount of love that we have from a spiritual perspective is immense. And I leave you with this. These are the people that you have met and interacted with. What's not in this calculation is the people that you will meet in future incarnations, such as this one. Because right now, we have each other. We are forging these bonds. We're building new relationships. And I guarantee you that the more we move forward, the more we will make friendships and relationships with more than just 4 people every lifetime. Imagine what the world will be like when everywhere you look, the people around you care deeply about you and support you. And you have a love for them in ways that is hard for us to understand at this point in time. That's a spiritual future. And so I hope that mathematics of reincarnation can settle in your heart a little bit in those dark moments when you're feeling a little downtrodden, when you're feeling a little bit lost, so you know that you're never alone. And truly, all we need is love, and we have a lot more of it than we imagine. We just have to remember the spirits that we are and our journey, and everything will become a little bit easier and we'll feel a little bit more loved. So here's to many more incarnations and to much more love in our lifetimes.